So with us for our last segment of the morning is Codi Trudell. And she is the DBE Program Manager. And then Katie Gillespie is the Region 1 Field Coordinator. So take it away.
Good morning. Yes, so I am Codi Trudell, and I'm with the Office of Civil Rights here. I'm based out of Salem in the Fairview Industrial Building. And then Katie is one of our field coordinators, and she's going to be joining in the conversation here in just a little bit. But to kick us off, could I get a quick show of hands? How many of you would say your work touches on construction and A&E? How many of you would say you are only touching on construction? Anybody only touching on A&E? Oh, great. Okay, this helps a lot, so we know where to focus on. So also real quick too, how many of you have had maybe more than 5 years with ODOT? Oh, good. That's about 50-50. That's nice. Okay. So today we're going to provide a very high level. We know we don't have a lot of time, and I'm also the only thing keeping you between your lunch break, so I will get you out of here to get some food. So we're going to do a high level overview as quickly as we can of just some key takeaways for the Office of Civil Rights here. My main hope is that if you do have questions later, the slideshow might be a good reference tool for you, and at least you can circle back or know where to reach out to us if you have any questions. So what is the Office of Civil Rights? We are tasked with promoting innovative programs that provide equitable access and opportunities in Oregon transportation. A lot of the work we do is equity related outside of the walls of ODOT. So we hear a lot about staff and equity inclusion within ODOT, but it's my office that primarily supports federal regulation and also how we engage the private sector in our beliefs on equity and inclusion. So the programs that we oversee include intermodal, Title VI, we have small business, which we also call emerging small business, which is what the ESB stands for. My program, which is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, TARO, which is Tribal Employee Rights, EEO, Equal Employment Opportunities, and OJT, On the Job Training. So those last three are where Katie's going to come in and talk to us in a moment. So let's talk about the DBE program. So first and foremost, this is federal regulation. It is 49 CFR Part 26. I also want to highlight that all the details that you could ever possibly need, links, the actual full CFR, anything is on our website. We do have a disadvantaged business enterprise header, so feel free to click there, and pretty much any tool or any direction you would need, forms, etc., are all going to be on our website. So if you want to read the rule in greater detail and length, that's where you can find it. But the rule basically says that we must comply with this in order to receive federal regulation, or to receive federal funds, we must be compliant with this federal regulation. So that's the part where I come into play, is to make sure that the policy and the objectives are being met so that we keep getting federal dollars. So ODOT is personally committed as a state to the Civil Rights Program, and we do so by encouraging the participation of disadvantaged businesses, or DBEs, in contracting opportunities. So what exactly is a DBE, you ask? We will get there in just a second, but a DBE program component must have monitoring and compliance and reporting. So a lot of what we do is shaped by the required reporting. Full disclaimer that, think about it this way, that probably in the early 90s, we were still paper-based. So how do we at ODOT get our systems up to speed to talk to a paper-based regulation? So I like to say that the feds were probably sitting there thinking about people entering stats and data once every month, having data hand typed in, but now we know that we have that data in real time. So the uniform report that I am required to provide, which you can also review on our website, is a little lagging in its ability. So yay, ODOT, we're faster probably than where the feds are. Big shocker, right? So a lot of what we're doing is making sure that our data and how we're capturing it still meets the needs of their regulations around reporting. So a DBE is a business owned by historically, socially, and economically disadvantaged individuals. ODOT only accepts DBE certification that is done through the office called PreBid is the acronym, which stands for the Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity. So please just stick with the acronym because it's taken me 2 full years to even remember what it says too. So PreBid. So one big takeaway I would like to leave with you, make sure that folks check PreBid frequently if they're using DBEs, primes. So the way that we look at it is if PreBid's database, just their external facing, anybody can hop on, you don't need a login. If you enter a DBE name and they are showing as certified, the prime is still good to go. If they search for the DBE and the DBE is no longer there, then that is a decertified firm, and then that means that is not going to be able to be used to meet your goals in your crediting. And if you have any primes or you yourselves are searching for DBEs and PreBids and have any questions at all or want further information, just shoot that to me and I can definitely assist with that. So the DBE program is required on all federally funded programs, regardless of if it's construction, consultant work, local agency projects. What that means is it is at least reviewed for goals. It doesn't necessarily mean it will get assigned a goal, but we must also include it in our reporting. So the dollars that go out that have federal funds tied to it are also included in our reporting. The DBE Policy Statement is what is kind of our guiding document here at the Oregon Department of Transportation. Matt Garrett signed it back in 2017 is the most recent version we have, so I expect to have a newer one once we have a director appointed again here soon. He will review, but as of right now, the current policy states that we will not discriminate based on race, color, sex, or national origin. That we will apply a narrowly tailored program, which is required by the CFR. The piece that I think I am most fond of is that it's to create a level playing field for DBEs to compete, which means that we want it to be equitable. We don't want it to be advantageous for anybody else. We should all just be playing on the same level. So I like to keep that in mind as we move forward with objectives of the program. We also work really hard to make sure that barriers are removed. That's a lot of what our supportive services are there for, to help get education and tools to firms that may not otherwise have them. So my office can also assist you with that. We also make sure that people stay eligible, and if they're not eligible, we need to make sure that they are looked into and possibly removed from the program. A lot of that can fall on PreBid's shoulders, so we try to partner with them. So keep that in mind. If you're seeing firms that you think maybe aren't meeting the criteria anymore, that's something you can definitely pass across to field coordinators or myself. And we also want to make sure that firms aren't just being built up to do ODOT work. We know that the more a firm is able to engage in both the private and public sector, the better a healthier economy for everybody. So we also partner with Port of Portland or City of Portland, and if we come across DBEs doing great work that could do work with those folks too, we would encourage that. And we also want to see DBEs eventually get just private sector work too, where no goals may be applied. And last but not least, the DBE program is given all of the same priority as all of the other obligations that ODOT incurs under US DOT agreements. So this is all the most interesting stuff, a current state of affairs, I would like to say. So as of October 1, we are operating with a goal of 15.37 overall for the state. That is a triennial goal, so it's in place from 2020 till 2022. The one caveat I want to mention is this has not been formally approved yet by the folks in DC. Oregon DOT has approved it, and that's why we're operating under such, but it is under legal sufficiency review right now back in DC. So as soon as it is formally recognized, we would probably receive just a formal letter and letting us know. But we're proceeding as is, that we are trying to meet a 15.37% goal. The disparity studies mentioned below is primarily what fuels and sets that threshold. So Director Garrett, back in May, along with some external stakeholders, which included AGC, ACEC, some minority contracting groups, and some other interests in obviously federal highway, we met starting in May and reviewed the disparity study. The actual baseline is 15.37, and then there's a step 2 downward adjustment and a step 2 upward adjustment. So if we had gone downward, we would have been around 12% for our overall goal, which is basically where we've been pretty much operating. We were at 11.6. But Director Garrett felt really passionate about the program, and hearing from all of the stakeholders, he really wanted to set ODOT up to succeed at a much higher level going forward. So he proposed a 15.37% goal. We had public hearings throughout the summer, and no further evidence pointed to any reason why we should go with the upward adjustment. We had recommendations for the 12%. So viewing all of that, we met then in July with Deputy Director Mather, and he agreed to proceed with the initial recommendation of 15.37. So some of you have probably seen me in your regions. I was out a few times to everybody this summer, so you are going to be seeing higher goals if you haven't already. Anything that was awarded after the beginning of October 1st is what goes into those uniform reports I talked about. It is based on the date of award, so that's what we're trying to hit, is what is met at the time of award. Race conscious and race neutral is some other language you probably hear a lot, and I don't have nearly enough time today to really break down what all of this means. So if you really ever want to digest a lot of this, please let me know. But short story I like to say is race conscious. Basically the disparity study gives us the guidance that without setting race conscious goals, which basically means you setting contract goals that must be met before award of a contract, is what we must do in the state of Oregon to even have some form of participation in the program. So the disparity study says without those hard goal setting, we likely wouldn't meet the objectives of the program. So that's why we continue to have disparity study information coming in, and we continue to set goals. So most of you are most familiar with those in the construction world, but I'm going to talk here now in a second on A&E setting because it's a little different world. Race neutral is anything that means you achieved that DBE participation without me having to set a goal as a requirement of award. So this could be basically a prime contractor gets a contract completely on their own and they are DBE. That would be race neutral. You can also credit race neutral to if a DBE is hired after a project has already committed other DBEs on the project. So there are a few ways that we look into that. And so like I said, the ODOT individual contract goals are considered race conscious, and those must be met before a contract is awarded, and there is a good faith effort process, which I did several trainings on this summer. So if you're interested again in that process, we have the slide deck. We worked a lot with AGC partners and engaged them on that. So we can always come and talk to your shop too about that if you're ever interested. Okay, so quickly on A&E. So A&E is a little different environment, obviously, because we're not in a low bid environment. So we need to set DBE goals before the release of the RFP. And we do have a standardized gold tier process, which I'm going to discuss in a moment. But biggest takeaway for anybody working on A&E, this is the email box that you want to send anything and everything and all questions to. I have a great team in the office that will kick any of that to me, and we will assist you on that. Also, just remember a goal or an assessment for a goal assignment will apply anytime there's $1 or more federal highway on a project. So if you were curious if your A&E project is supposed to have a goal, yes, it should be reviewed for a goal at least if there is $1 or more of federal funding on it. And we also have a goal exception process. So we're going to talk about those just now. So these are the 3 standard tiers, and in the bottom there you can also see the exception process. So if you're working on an A&E project that has under $100,000, a single discipline, or any ER contracts, you would just automatically assign it a 0% goal. If it falls into $100,000 and has 2 to 4 disciplines, it's going to fall into the 3% assignment. And anything over 100,000 and includes 5 or more disciplines is going to be 8.5%. We also have the goal exception process. It is a form. You can find it on our website, but I also just suggest email me and we can have a conversation. The goal exception basically means you don't think your project falls into any of those 3, but let's say perhaps you think maybe 6% might be more reasonable. So shoot me an email, I'll get you the form, and we'll keep talking back and forth about how we can adjust that on A&E. A&E is a really great, I like to say, playground where we have a little more time to really finesse and get us to where we want to be. We did use the goal exception process on the Rose Quarter A&E to actually bump the goal up. So if any of you have really great projects that you think there are a lot of DBE opportunities coming up in the A&E field, that is another tool that we can employ to make sure that we get you a higher goal. So I think we landed upwards of 12% for Rose Quarter through the exception process. So these are just good conversation pieces to have anytime you're in doubt. I rely on procurement to help make sure that those are actually set before they execute any of those contracts. And then my team will eventually get the commitment forms. So some key things to remember before you're going out. Do you include the DBE goal or no goal in the solicitation? Ensure contract and solicitation documents include the applicable goal or no goal DBE provisions in the contract provision template. And then once the project is awarded, make sure that you email the execution notice to that PSK email box. Giving us that heads up helps us track the performance and make sure we get it in those uniform reports and count the dollars appropriately. And email a copy of all amendments that include federal highway funding, even if there is no goal, to that same email address. The instructions are on all of the forms too, so if you ever are like, which one do I send and when do I not send, you can find them on the forms too. So the required DBE forms for the A&E projects, there is a committed breakdown, which was what I was saying after a agreement has been reached on the goal setting and you're working with your consultants. Please submit these prior to the contract execution. This is basically our way of saying that a contractor has demonstrated good faith towards meeting the goal. And then obviously we don't need these if you have a 0% or less goal. And complete each form for each individual DBE subcontractor. So don't fill out one form for every subcontractor on the job. There's signatures and all kinds of good stuff. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then paid summary reports, as with all ODOT projects, this is essential and really important when there's more than $10,000 involved. So include subs, DBE or not. This is how we track these payments and ultimately make sure that there's nobody falling through the cracks as far as reporting for dollars going out the door. So construction. This slide is really helpful in just kind of a quick overview of what to do. So goal setting needs to happen at 90% PS&E. So what I highly recommend is there is a goal exception form on our website. If you're not familiar with it and can't find it for construction, read that. It also has details in there about contacting me before you're setting a goal. So if you have concerns and want your goal at a certain place, this is the time to do it. Work with me ahead of time. Help me know what you see and what you don't see. It gets a lot trickier afterwards to change the goal. So please, as soon as you have a project, even if that project is still several months out or you're already feeling one way strongly or not, that gives us a lot of flexibility and a lot of time to work with the other projects you have coming up so that we can attribute those dollars maybe to other projects or other places. So feel free to just let me know at any time where you would like to see those adjustments. That said, knowing that we do have a higher goal right now, there's a lot that I just don't have the wiggle room on. And unfortunately, again, going back to the days when they were probably entering paper, there isn't, as a lot of you know, I get projects that are going to need a goal set, but they're still not going to bid for 6 or 7 months. And when I have to report on that uniform report monthly and project and predict how we're going to meet 15% in 16 months and not know race neutral participation, Federal Highway basically is looking to me monthly to prove that I'm setting high goals. Otherwise, that's when they start coming down on us and worry about compliance. So there's a lot of pieces on my end that I'm trying to track all at once. So we're doing our best, but this being a higher goal that we've had in a while, it's going to be a little trickier than it has been in years past. Bid book review, that comes through to my office as well. So those are the commitment forms. We're going to be looking for the type of work to make sure DBEs assigned on the project are actually doing work that's valid on the project. Otherwise, we're not just going to hire a DBE to go sell snow cones and make our requirement on a project, right? SSUR submissions, the DBE commitment form 1s is also going to be tied to the bid book review. That's how we're looking. But the form 1s, we're looking really high glance, supplier, they're a DBE, they're a subcontractor, does the math add up, and can this contractor commit to using those DBEs? The committed DBE breakdown review. So as you see, there's DBE form 2785, DBE form 2531. We aptly call these form 1 and form 2. So the quick way to think of it is form 1 is at the time that the bid package comes in, and form 2 is before award. So form 2 is where we're really looking over the bid book versus what the intent to award contractor is proposing at that time. And we do our best to try to catch as much as we can at that time, but then when it gets to field coordinators, the actual work plan is where this will also come into play as well. And then the award notification. Again, the biggest trigger for us is once that is awarded, now it goes into our reporting column, and that's the monthly data that I'm helping to provide to Federal Highway to keep proving to them that we're still doing our best to meet our goal. And then last but not least, the pre-con letters. I'm going to gloss over this real quick because Katie's going to come up in just a second here. But the mandatory pre-bid meeting provides the forum to explain the civil rights processes to prospective bidders. So field coordinators can be engaged to participate in those and help you anytime you have those coming up. So always make sure that you're talking to them. Katie, I'm sure, can speak to that if you have more questions. But the advertised bid date too is the date the project is advertised and bidding opens. And then the bid opening, which is the actual bid date, is the date the contractor bids are actually opened and bidding closes. So OCR bid notification form 734-2848 refers to this as bid close. So we just kind of keep that slide in there just to help if as you go back you have any questions around that timeline. Okay, I will hand it over to Katie now.
Awesome. So I'm Katie Gillespie, a Region 1 Field Coordinator, one of the Region 1 Field Coordinators. Max Bernstein is the other Region 1 Field Coordinator, dealing more on this table's projects over here. So local agency work. Each of the regions has a field coordinator that represents and is out there for assistance. I know we're short on time. I'm going to fly through my part, but I just want to let you guys know, reach out to us. We're here for a resource. Our Salem office and the field coordinators, each of the regions has a designated field coordinator, so that's what we're here for. So with that said, I just want to touch base briefly on equal employment opportunity, the EEO special provisions. They are a requirement of the contract, and we do have them in there. Part of ODOT, we have affirmative action goals for federal highway projects, and those are listed in the EEO specs. In addition to federally funded projects, ODOT has established diversity targets, and those are also listed in the EEO special provisions. And on top of that, part of the specs, contractors have an obligation to report, and in addition to the subcontractors. So all that's listed in the EEO special provisions. So I just wanted to put a slide in there, making sure those are out in the contract books when they go out to bid. OJT, on-the-job training. This is an awesome opportunity for prime contractors and subcontractors. Anybody deal with OJT? Anybody know what OJT is? Okay, so on-the-job training is for any federally funded projects. It goes out to a process that comes into OCR. We review it. There's a formula that was developed based on industry, DOT, and federal highway. And we created this formula. It gets plugged in, and it gets determined if there's an OJT goal on a project. We've seen OJT goals anywhere from 400 to 4,000 hours. And how it works is the contractor gets reimbursed at a $20 an hour based on the hours, up to 150 hours. So there is a bid item for that at a $20 an hour rate. Some of the larger projects, we might be seeing a little bit with alternative delivery packages going out. We might see something a little bit different, not just like an incentive, disincentive financial base, but like a 20% goal and incentive, disincentive that way based on the apprenticeship hours. So the OJT specs and regulations go over that. It's part of the Bureau of Labor and Industries Apprenticeship and Training Division. It provides a career opportunities. You earn while you learn. And so it's a great opportunity for apprenticeship. The construction industry, we need people. So this is a great way for prime contractors to look at that. Increase workforce diversity. This goal is set at 90% PS&E. So when you're submitting your goal request to Codi for DBE Goals, OJT is also set at this time frame. TARO, Tribal Employment Right Ordinance. So we have an MOU with Warm Springs, Grand Ronde, and Umatilla. In Region 1 and 2, it becomes a little bit tricky because I'll show you in a map, but there's some overlap areas. But basically, there's a project selection process. So right now, all three tribes are going through the STIP process and looking over projects that are coming up in 2020 and 2021. And they're going through a selection process with that. Normally, you won't see anything under $1 million. They'll put a TARO goal on it, but there is a process with that, with contract goals. We don't set the goals. The tribes set the goals. So they'll set that process, and a really cool feature that we've put into the PS&E stage for DBE's OJT goal is the TARO goal is going to be included. So it's a one-stop shop. When you submit that goal to OCR for a goal request, the TARO goal will be included on that. We've had some lessons learned. Give you a few examples in Region 1 where the TARO specs were left out of the contract altogether when it went out to bid. We've also had the wrong specs get put in spec books. And so really pay attention to what specs are going out, what tribe has selected that project if there's a TARO goal on that project. There's also a contract fee that the prime contractor is responsible to pay at the time of award. So that's a whole nother process we can go over. But reach out to us if you guys want more information on it and how that works. We can go over that in more details. This is the TARO map. So as you can see, Grand Ron is on the green within their Grand Ron reservation and off. Then there's Warm Springs, and there's an overlap area right there. And we have special maps that we can go over all that information. And then Umatilla is over there on the blue. Steve Leap is awesome. He was able to get us set up with like a map with milepost markers and kind of show you where those areas are, because the I-5 corridor in Region 1 and 2, we have an overlap area between Grand Ron and Warm Springs. Here's some information resources for OCR. And any questions? I know we're running out of time, so I'm sorry. Of course you have a question.
So before we go to the questions, just on the lessons learned, the project up in Region 1 where we missed Taro was the Farley Slide project. And after we realized that that project had gotten a bid and we awarded the contract, we actually ended up doing a very costly contract change order because we were basically at the mercy of the contractor. I think we ended up paying about $200,000 to negotiate that. The other piece for the transportation project managers is that if you advance a project, be sure you contact your field coordinator, because that might have not been on the initial list that the tribes reviewed. We had one recently come through that way as well, where we advanced a project, tried to take it to bid, and realized, oh, we missed Taro, and had to go back and get the Taro specs in there. And then the other piece related to DBE goals is, as Codi said, at 90%. The process for that is really going to be looking at bid items and subcontracting opportunities for the project. So really, you really want to work with your construction PMs to have that conversation about, based on the type of work and location, are there a lot of subcontractable opportunities or not? So let's say you have a paving project and the goal comes out to be 15%. That's probably going to be really, really high. That's where you want to have conversations with Codi and her team to say, we think this is high, we think it should be lower. But like she said, the goal statewide, the 15.37 is very high, and we're going to try to achieve that. So it's going to have to be a very compelling justification for why we're going to change that goal. But have that conversation with your PM, because the challenge to ODOT is if you have specialty projects, like one on the coast, cathodic protection, where there's not a lot of opportunities for subcontracting, you're only going to get one or two bidders. And that doesn't promote competition, and we end up paying more for those bids. So with that, questions?
We have time for one question here, unless you guys want to split it.
So are you guys looking at more of the DBE sub-consultants? Because I see the same 3 or 4 sub-consultants to cover those percentages. And if I change those task items, those percentages are wiped out.
Yeah.
And so I'm hardly ever meeting that 8.5%.
Yep. So along those lines, this is part of why else we've rolled out the good faith effort trainings, is that even without higher overall state goals, we know that we're boom and bust, right? And so when we are really, really busy, it's hard to get all of these DBE consultants, and firms also just want to grow out of the program and become on their own. So we do our best, and unfortunately, some of the CFR language around how a disparity study is done doesn't allow for a lot of these time lapses. So when we did the disparity study, it's already coming up to 2-3 years before we have to impact these goals. So the amount of DBEs actually available may change. So we do our best, but our biggest plug is, if you know of anybody that could be a DBE, please do anything you can to help get them certified and get them squared away. But yeah,
or let us know. We'll help. We'll help with that process for sure.
Katie, Codi, thank you so much. Great
Absolutely.
information.
Thank you.